Hello to everyone from Nicosia. Of course, we would all prefer to be physically in Brussels for the NATO at Work conference and have a much more direct conversation. But even from a distance, we can take advantage of this opportunity to the people by discussing online and using social media and other technology networks. So let's stick on the bright side of things. Firstly, I would like to thank the President and all our friends at the Martin Center, as well as the Adenauer Institute, for giving us this great opportunity to discuss in depth all the current issues the European project is facing these past few days. I would also like to express my appreciation for the presence of our distinguished speakers here today, all of which have very willingly accepted our invitation for this panel. So allow me to welcome our guests, starting from the Honorable Lady of this panel, Mrs. Dora Bakoyannis, a prominent political Greek and European political figure, member of the European Parliament, and former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece. The broad understanding of issues, especially issues of European and foreign policy, and the analytical way of thinking shown by Mrs. Bakoyannis during the years is always impressive. I have to confess myself, not only that I follow her political activity for decades, but it has influenced my own way of thinking a lot. So welcome, Mrs. Bakoyannis, to our panel today.
Thank you.
We also have with us the former President of Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Paolo Alli, from Italy, a politician of his own opinion with a lot of experience both on the European and the transatlantic level, as well as on the energy field. I had the opportunity this past few days to check Mr. Alli's very direct way of expressing his own views on issues, and I was quite impressed by it. I'm sure that his contribution in this discussion will be of high importance. Not to mention that the only non-speaker in this conversation will keep us focused on the international level of this discussion. Mr. Alli, thank you very much for joining us, and I would like to welcome you here.
Thank you.
The Glafkos Clerides Institute and ex-Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cyprus, Mr. Ioannis Kasoulides. Mr. Kasoulides has been, for me, the most valuable political mentor since I was a very young person. His ability to be aware of what is happening and why it's happening on every corner of our planet is always outstanding. Being a true European, the Cypriot politician that not only knows in depth, but has handled extensively the issue we are discussing today, I am sure that his contribution will be enlightening for all of us in this conversation. Mr. Kasoulides, you are just a few kilometers away, but let me welcome you online as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we are here today to discuss the geopolitical challenges of the Eastern Mediterranean and the European Union-Turkey relations. Two highly interconnected issues that are already creating very vivid discussions in every level of the European institutions, to the point that the European Union's ability to play a geopolitical role in its own neighborhood has been put into question. We have the energy issue and the European Union's energy security question, the formation of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum and the signing of the EastMed deal. We are also experiencing the illegal research and drilling activities from Turkey, both in Greece and Cyprus, initiatives that caused twice so far a standoff between two very strong naval forces, the Greek and the Turkish one in the Aegean, two countries that are also allies within the NATO framework. We have the ongoing conflicts in Syria, Libya, and Nagorno-Karabakh, during which major violations of the international law have taken place, especially from the Turkish side. We have the acquisition of the Russian anti-aircraft S-400 missiles by Turkey that created a lot of tensions in NATO, but have not been responded in a tangible manner by anyone. We have the illegal opening of the ghost city of the occupied ghost city by the Turkish troops, Famagusta in Cyprus, an action against a number of UN resolutions that also jeopardizes the efforts to solve the Cyprus, for which now Turkey now claims that it wants a permanent division. All these things have caused a lot of discussion on the European strategic autonomy issue and sovereignty, especially since many doubts have risen about the Americas' long-term commitment to global leadership and European security, and the future and the role of the transatlantic alliance. At the same time, Russia and Turkey are playing, mostly in conjunction, a much more efficient geopolitical role in the region, taking advantage of the retreat of the United States and the absence of a European effective foreign policy. Turkey continues to be an EU candidate member state, and it takes, let's say, 10 hostile steps and then moving back a bit before each European Council. There is a lot of tension and discussion on its relation with Europe, as well as whether economic sanctions should be imposed on it or not. France and Germany are already leading the debate on the European level on Europeans' geopolitical challenges, expressing opinions that are creating also tensions within the European framework the past few weeks. So my first question is, why is all this situation important? How does the Eastern Mediterranean and everything that happens in the area reflect on the European Union? Is it just a matter of Greece and Cyprus feeling threatened, or is it actually a European issue, what we are facing these days? Mrs. Bakoyannis, let me begin with you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sophocleous. Thank you to all of you. I would like to be there. Unfortunately, the pandemic does not allow us to be together, so we have to start with these possibilities which are given to us. Allow me to start by setting the stage and the state of play in East Mediterranean, focusing in the past 2 years or so, given that this has been the time frame of the everlasting arising tensions, even hostility in the region. Prior to that, the East Med region has been primarily challenged by the migration crisis and the refugee waves, historically by the Cypriot issue, and highlighted by the cooperation triangles between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel on the one hand, and Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt on the other. To make a long story short, over the years and through difficulties, key countries around East Mediterranean have opted for cooperation and collaboration, be it in security, in energy, in migration, all countries except but one, Turkey. Turkey has dramatically shifted its position and policy in the past 2 years from merely a challenging one to an aggressive and threatening behavior. To paraphrase a known saying, Turkey no longer wants the entire cake and to eat too, but is moving towards aggressively grabbing the cake. This change of stance has manifested in various occasions prior to the pandemic and has culminated ever since. The main terrain where Turkey manifests its defiance in this regard is that of international law and the legal rules that guarantee a peaceful coexistence between sovereign states. Turkey has systematically violated internationally recognized norms or attempted to redefine them unilaterally. Both Greece's and Cyprus' exclusive economic zones are challenged and violated by Turkey on a daily basis for years now, in an attempt to muddy the waters and infringe on the sovereignty of neighboring countries. This disregard of international law reached new heights when Turkey signed a memorandum with Libya that not only violated the international law of the sea, both customary and written, but it violated logic and geography itself. That memorandum tried to convince the world that Turkey and Libya have bordering economic zones, erasing from the map entire Greek islands like Rhodes and Crete. In 2020, the situation deteriorated even further. Turkey moved forward from provocative rhetoric on redefining borders and changing the Lausanne Treaty to concrete aggressive actions. In February 2020, at the early stages of the pandemic, Greece came faced with an hybrid attack on its borders with Turkey. Hundreds of thousands of migrants were within nights pushed to the Greek land border of Evros, while at the same time a misinformation campaign with fake news and fake videos spread regionally on social media in what constituted a coordinated act by Turkey towards Greece and Europe. While before migrants were instrumentalized by Turkey for economic gains and bargaining power, on February they became pawns at a new revisionist strategy that aims to change the balance of power and geography in the East Mediterranean region. This should not be seen as an exaggeration. If we think on Turkey, compare its policy towards its neighboring countries, we can detect a clear attempted strategy for geographic and political reform. Syria, Iraq, Libya, Cyprus, Nagorno-Karabakh, Greece are examples and cases where Turkey has pursued or it's currently pursuing a revisionist and aggressive policy that has taken monetary and economic form and even military intervention and weapon supply. In Libya, Turkey has systematically and so far successfully interfered, stalling the peace process by supplying weapons and fighters. A few months ago, Turkey came face to face with France due to the fact that it denied a search of vessel in one of its ships that was headed to Libya, and the same incident repeated itself last week, this time with Germany. In Libya, as in Syria, Europe was, and to a large extent still is, unable to promote and safeguard its own security interests. This is evident not just for Turkey, but for other players like Russia and China. Turkey is simply the one that is seizing the moment to make gains, as many as possible. Its success story in Syria and Libya, Turkey is further implementing it in Nagorno-Karabakh. Through aggressive and revisionistic rhetoric, supply of arms and fighters, and during a time when the world is distracted with the pandemic, the US elections, and the economic turmoil, Turkey is making its geopolitical move to gain regional power and challenge the status quo. Europe can no longer be dormant or turn a blind eye to that policy, for it will irrevocably damage its interest and its values. The first reaction came yesterday from the European Parliament, and it was a very clear message to Turkey. Turkey can no longer be seen as a Greek or Cypriot bilateral issue. When Turkey violates Greece's exclusive economic zone, sending research and military vessels, which is happening today as we speak, then Turkey is violating European interests, European sea borders. When Turkey threatens Greece and Cyprus with war, then Europe is threatened with war. In August, Greece and Turkey came dramatically close to a military standoff that has been looming over the East Med ever since. In Cyprus, Turkey interfered with elections and violated decades of Security Council resolutions, reopening occupied territories and setting ablaze all attempts for a solution to the Cyprus issue. At the same time, President Erdogan has been using hate speech against European leaders, instrumentalizing religion and faith turning museums like Hagia Sophia and Kariak Museum into mosques, portraying himself as the sole protector of Islam. There is a well-thought strategy here, a grab for power and authoritarianism which Europe cannot just ignore. These are real geopolitical challenges, and above all, a challenge of values, of principles that cannot be fixed by throwing money at the problem. Europe needs to acknowledge that above challenges need to pull the head out of the sand. Observe how the Mediterranean, North Africa, Middle East, and all the regions around it have been changing dramatically over the years and finally take ownership of its role and its purpose in the region. Europe can no longer be disillusional about the role of the United States. There is a new reality today, one very different from what we thought. In the prevailing, if the prevailing of the US in the world order signaled the end of history for Francis Fukuyama in 1992, then today history is ending again. The US we knew is no longer here and will no longer be in the future. President Trump may have lost the elections, and President-elect Biden will hopefully restore faith and trust in multilateralism and global cooperation. But what became evident in the past 4 years is that the US world's presence and role as the keeper of the order has ended. It is a paradigm shift in which we must adapt and evolve. When it comes to Turkey, Europe has been dangling the carrot while afraid to use the stick. I'm not an advocate of aggression and always opted for dialogue and communication, and I'm very well known in Greece for that. Yet, when the stick loses its value, then the carrot is not enough, and the other party will go for a bigger bite. Europe must come to this realization sooner than later and step up its game. Europe must redefine its relations with Turkey in a comprehensive and consistent manner. I believe we need to pursue a clear and all-encompassing deal with Turkey in the same format like the one we pursue with the UK. From trade relations to migration, to security and defense, to values and democratic principles, we as Europe need to make clear to Turkey and every other country that takes recourse in revisionism that frank cooperation and collaboration is welcome, yet the fundamental European interests will be protected. Put forth a win-win situation that will respect the interests of all, but it will not disregard the vital interests of Europe itself and of its member states. To conclude, I have said in the past that I would like to have been a Minister of Foreign Affairs of Luxembourg, but I haven't been that lucky. What I mean by that is that we cannot change geography, dear friends, at least not as we tried to do so in the past. We know better now. As such, we need to learn to coexist with others, and we Europeans need to be united and in solidarity. Europe has made the choice long ago to come together, to pursue prosperity, peace for its people as one. We need to be able to defend and promote that choice, that prosperity. We need to be able to defend our region and our neighborhood, for it is and it will be our home. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Sophocleous.
We thank you, Mrs. Bakoyannis, a lot. I note your quote about the stick and the carrot. When the stick loses its head, the carrot is never enough. And having said that, I would like to ask Mr. Alli's point of view, and I hope we have a transatlantic point of view as well in your state.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say that the Turkey issue is not a bilateral issue. between Turkey and Greece or Cyprus. It's not only an issue which influences Europe, but it's also a concern for NATO, of course, as it was said before. It's a concern for the United States. It's a concern for global scenarios. But let me make just an assumption, starting with my speech. I think that the Mediterranean Sea in the past years has regained its centrality in world geopolitics. Unfortunately, the centrality has been gained for growing instability, but we have to try to turn these problems into opportunities. I don't repeat what are the challenges in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea now, because it has been said very clearly by Madam Bakoyannis, and also in the very good introduction of our moderator. I probably will say something different on some issues, but anyway, regarding Turkey, well, Turkey has been used for decades by the West, including Europe, United States, and NATO, as a buffer against the Soviet Union, against the instabilities coming from Middle East, including Iran and so on. Turkey has also been, discussing with Europe about possible entering the European Union. Of course, I'm not in favor of that, of course, but for years we have given the impression to Turkey that there might be chances. Then we stopped the dialogue, and this has given further fuel to the engine of Erdogan for his wavering politics. Turkey has a long democratic tradition, but Erdogan now seems to have completely lost control of the situation and probably control over himself. I have had for 5 years in my mandate at the NATO Parliamentary Assembly a lot of opportunities to interact with the Greek delegation, the Turkish delegation, and so on. And I think that something which changed dramatically the position of Turkey and position of Erdogan was the failed coup in 2016, July 2016. I remember I was there to see the bombing and the consequences of the attempt, and I think that from that point on, Erdogan has increased progressively its wavering politics. Now he's completely unstable. So I will generally prefer to distinguish between a people and the leadership. I do the same with Russia, because I think that the Russian people is a great people, but I don't rely in any way on Vladimir Putin, for example, from my personal experience. By the way, Turkey has been for decades a loyal ally in NATO. It has the second armed forces of the alliance. So we must keep in mind this, not just to justify anything of what is happening, but just to keep in mind as a broader scenario. Well, I would like to open a little bit the scenario. It was already been said by our moderator and also by Madam Bakoyannis. I was looking at the map, and Cyprus is exactly in the middle of two different conflicts which have the same actors, Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh, more or less 1,300 kilometers from Cyprus. The common item is Turkey and Russia playing the same game. I know quite well the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh because for 5 years I spoke about this item with the Armenian delegation and the Azerbaijan delegation to NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Well, I think that Nagorno-Karabakh is important not only for what is happening now in the Eastern Mediterranean and for the relationship between Russia and Turkey, for the confrontation which is happening between Russia and Turkey there, which is the same problem in Libya, which is the same problem for the control of the Mediterranean, particularly the Eastern Mediterranean, because we never mentioned Russia. But Russia's interest in controlling the access to the Black Sea has been one of the reasons why Russia intervened in Syrian conflict, to control the harbors, the Syrian harbors on the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. This must be kept clear in mind. Putin is strongly interested in what is happening in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. And Putin is not a friend of Europe. We know quite well. So, okay, we have to blame Turkey for what is happening, but we cannot forget Putin. And some say that the conclusion of the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh has been a victory of Putin. My opinion is exactly the reverse. I think that the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict has been, since at least 12 years, the conflict of Mr. Putin. And now Putin, for the first time, failed to control the game because Turkey went in. I don't go into details, but I just mention one thing, that Nagorno-Karabakh, legally speaking, is a region of Azerbaijan. So I don't understand what the Armenian army does inside the Azerbaijan territory. Because if we speak about territorial integrity, the international right is not on the side of Armenia. I am personally a friend of the Armenians. They are Christians. I think that they have had a very difficult history, but I don't think that we can solve the problem without taking into consideration the international law, because otherwise we have to forget the international law also in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. We cannot use the double standard, of course, in our approach. So I think that Turkey and Russia are playing a role in the Mediterranean region, in Nagorno-Karabakh, in other places. This is due also, or mainly, to the absence of Europe and to the absence of the United States. Don't forget this. Now, I think what are the players which can determine the future of the region? I have to say three players, NATO, the US, and Europe. Regarding NATO, well, NATO is the only common table today between Turkey and Greece. Turkey has demonstrated to be very wavering also in its position in NATO. It's very difficult for NATO to deal with Turkey today, but having a common place to discuss is better than nothing. Don't forget that NATO also has a permanent committee with Russia. So NATO is now much more than in the past is political and military alliance. It was military and political. Now it's political and military. So this is a field of discussion. We have to remember that the NATO philosophy is project stability outside its border. Putin's idea is export instability, because instability is in favor of his policy. And Turkey is in between. Sometimes with NATO, sometimes with itself, sometimes with Russia. The US, well, I agree that the election of Biden can change several issues, particularly regarding multilateralism, because as it was already said, multilateralism is the only way to control such situations. Well, and of course, the continuous strategy of Trump of trying to destroy multilateralism has given rise to bilateral approaches, and we see those also in the Mediterranean region, of course. But Trump has done also something good. He has started dialogues between Israel, Abu Dhabi, and Bahrain, between Serbia and Kosovo. The last visit Secretary Pompeo to Greece and Turkey seem to start similar approach. Is it propaganda? Maybe. I think so. But again, it's better than nothing. And so now the US are called to have a new approach to the region. I hope Biden will not follow the disaster of President Obama. And Biden was the vice president with Obama, because Obama was prisoner of his Nobel Prize for Peace, and he withdrew from the Middle East, giving rise to the consequences we have seen in the past years in Syria and Iraq. So Biden will have a great challenge in the Mediterranean region to decide if he wants to be again protagonist or not. And last, Europe. Many things have already been said, and I agree, of course. I don't know sanctions or not, that will be decided by the European Parliament and institutions. Of course, also in this case, we cannot forget dialogue, even if it's very difficult to have dialogue with Erdogan. But we cannot only have an approach based on strength. We have to balance strength and dialogue, because strength and dialogue are the two faces of the coin, the two sides of the coin. Strength without dialogue is violence. Dialogue without strength is submission. The problem is that the question is Europe today strong enough to start a dialogue or to go on a dialogue with Turkey, balancing strength and dialogue? This is a question mark. I don't have the answer, but it's a question mark. I think that the final goal could be a special treaty between Europe and Turkey, including energy, migration, trading, defense, and so on. But it's not yet the time, because we need two conditions: a reliable Turkey, and Turkey will not be reliable until Erdogan is in, and a strong political Europe. And unfortunately, in my opinion, Europe is not yet so strong politically. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alli. I know, and I want to stress the way you put all the players on the table. I mean, Russia, Turkey, NATO, the United States, and the European Union, because all this situation is affecting, obviously, everyone. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kasoulides. Mr. Kasoulides, you are considered the architect of all these trilateral associations in the area. And maybe you can also give us your views on how the area can help itself in this situation.
Yes, thank you very much, and I salute my fellow speakers since I have the floor. Let me say that I will not center my intervention to the Greece, Cyprus, and Turkey matter, because I fully subscribe to what Mrs. Bakoyannis has said. On the other hand, my answer to your question, my dear moderator, is exactly this. What is the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean, which goes as further away as the Arab Peninsula, and how the Eastern Mediterranean, the moderate countries of the Eastern Mediterranean, they are mainly Sunni Arab countries, and Israel, can help themselves. And I begin by saying that the region, as I have described it, is suffering from polarization, from realignment, and by this realignment I mean that the poles, on the one hand, are three poles, not as physics say two. So on the one hand we have Iran, and its non-state actors affiliated with Iran, like Hezbollah, like the Iraqi militias, like the Houthis in Yemen, and of course, the Islamists in Libya. On the other hand, we have the moderate Arab countries, the monarchies, plus Egypt and Israel, who share a common threat nowadays, a common threat coming from Iran in the first place. And this is leading to a realignment between these moderate Arab countries for the first time. And then we have a smaller pole, the alliance between Turkey and Qatar, who advocate the ideology of political Islam, and through this effort, they undermine the stability in the monarchies in the area and in Israel and Egypt, which is not a monarchy. So, first of all, there is a de facto realignment in this region, a realignment that may contribute to a stability in the region by these countries that are mind-liked to group together, and in this way a multilateral forum of the Eastern Mediterranean, to which the two direct neighbors of these groups, which is Greece and Cyprus, can participate in this, bringing the link with the European Union and its common foreign and security policy alongside. Now, Turkey, with its revisionist policy, has played a destabilizing in all the areas where managed to get herself into: Syria, Iraq, Libya, and Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey also is not the faithful ally anymore. Years long past when Turkey was a faithful ally into NATO. On the contrary, Turkey doesn't hesitate to come into conflict or threaten the use of force, both to two member states of the European Union, Cyprus and Greece, of which one, Greece, is also a member of the NATO alliance. Putin, I agree with Mr. Ali and the role that Vladimir Putin is playing and what his interests are. But I'm afraid that if we evaluate the role played by Turkey in its relations with Vladimir Putin, we will see that it's more likely to be in connivance with Vladimir Putin rather than the United States and Europe. There is no need in me elaborating on this, but there are so many facts and examples that attest to this. What is Europe seeking? Is seeking stability in its neighborhood. It's seeking to bring more stability in the region of the Eastern Mediterranean as I have described it. It has a strength. It depends to what strength. Military strength? No. But economic strength? Yes. If we are talking about leverage on Turkey, and if we look at Turkey and its relations in trade and economic relations with the European Union is much more stronger than the United States. And it can use this leverage in a way that it will warn Turkey about its policy and its policies and make it understood that these policies are not satisfactory at all vis-a-vis the European Union. And I think that in the NATO alliance, I also see that the role of Mr. Putin is to keep open all the wounds in the NATO alliance and is not in favor of the solution of any of the problems, is rather sustaining them for his own interests. And in this, Turkey plays the game of Mr. Putin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kasoulides. All of you have talked, and for the regional approach, because I think it's very important for everyone to know what's happening in this area before getting into how it's affecting all the rest. But all of you have spoken about between strength and dialogue. Europe has to play, that NATO has to play. All of you talked about the retreat of the United States and what is happening with NATO nowadays, and how will the transition of power to Mr. Biden will affect the defense policy of Europe and the foreign policy of Europe. There is this debate this past few weeks between France, especially the French President, Mr. Macron, and the German defense minister, Mrs. AKK, as we are used to call her. Whether, despite the fact that Biden is getting the presidency after the election, Europe should work towards its strategic autonomy, or whether it should continue to depend on NATO and the United States. No one is saying that NATO should be abandoned. It's the level of its role that is being questioned. So I would like to ask all three of you your position on this matter and how the handling of Turkey is affecting all this conversation and the handling of the Eastern European question nowadays, and the geopolitical role of Europe vis-a-vis what Mr. Alli has pointed out, the either cooperation or disputes of interest between Russia and Turkey these days. Ms. Bakoyannis.
Well, thank you. It's quite a long story, so it might be a little bit longer answer. Let me just start by saying I followed very closely what Mr. Ali said about Nagorno-Karabakh. I was the chair of the OSCE for 1 year and dealt a lot with this frozen conflict, traveled a lot both to Azerbaijan and to Armenia, trying to find a way to solve the problem. Mr. Ali is right. Legally, Azerbaijan, it was the territory of Azerbaijan, which we spoke about, and Armenia it was a little bit similar to the Cyprus issue, what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. On the other side, the Armenians have a very long presence in the region. And the numbers were not the same with Cyprus because the Armenians were much more than the Azeris. But anyway, what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh was a little bit, to me, allow me to be blunt here, a very cynical way that Russia and Mr. Putin dealt with the issue. When 2 years ago the government in Armenia changed after this so-called Velvet Revolution in Armenia, it was a new government which felt the need to be more independent from Russia than the other governments were before this. So this was something which Russia did not like at all. Coming afterwards at the crossroad between Armenia and Turkey, it was very clear that Mr. Putin, and it was very clear also by his statements, the balance was in favor of Turkey. So that's why he tried to keep all this, the Russian presence in the region, yes, but on the other side, he did not speak out and did not say clearly what the Turkish position was in Nagorno-Karabakh and how the Turkey intervened in Nagorno-Karabakh, both with fighters and with guns. So it was a very, very cynical reading of Russian interests in the region. And it was very clear that Mr. Putin preferred to keep his relations with Turkey intact. So what is happening? What will happen now? I'm afraid that the whole situation has arrived at a moment where we have to be very, very clear with ourselves, and we have to speak the truth between us. And the truth is that NATO is in an extremely difficult position, and that this Pontus Pilatus reaction from NATO is something that for NATO itself is very difficult to keep up in the future. NATO cannot just say that we are unhappy because Turkey bought the S-400. We are unhappy because Turkey used the S-400. We were not happy because Turkey menaced NATO airplanes with the Russian S-400. That we are not happy that a NATO alliance ship like the French ship was menaced by another NATO alliance. So I think that it is very clear that we arrive at a moment where the whole role of NATO, I'm not going as far as President Macron, but the whole role of NATO will be put in question. And NATO has to clear its position on a lot of issues. Now, I'm a long supporter of European strategic independence. Very few of us were at the time when we start speaking about that. I'm afraid that a lot of my colleagues at the time felt that we Greeks can say that because we give 2% of our GDP to defense. But the truth is that, yes, Mr. Kasoulides is right. The economic force of Europe is very big, but we cannot have a common foreign and defense policy if our defense is not also there. So I hope that dealing with all these questions we are dealing today, we will realize soon enough that these conversations which are starting now will have to go on, and that we have to realize, if the European impact is what we would like it to be, that this impact will only be possible if our military presence is also possible. The third and last point I would like to make is, Mr. Kasoulides mentioned it, towards Turkey. We are the first trade partner of Turkey, the Europe. We are representing 500 million people. And we are able today with President Erdogan, and that's where I disagree with Mr. Ali. I know President Erdogan for years. He is a man who quite easily adapts to reality, which means that he has not a lot of difficulties in realizing what he has to do and change positions. So I believe that we don't have to wait. We have to be very clear with Turkey and with President Erdogan. Today, not tomorrow, not after tomorrow. Postponement of the situation will only create more problems. And be clear with him. Yes, we want good relations with Turkey. Yes, we want Turkey to be our trade partner, which is also extremely important for Turkey, mainly in the economic situation Turkey is now. Yes, we want to have an agreement on the refugees, on the immigrants, etc. But this means that Turkey has to abide to international law and to the rules. We will not change our value system to adapt to the Turkish value system. Turkey has to adapt to our value system. Turkey has to agree that we are ready to go to international court for the differences, to agree based on international law to agreements. But this is something which has to be agreed from the Turkish side. So what I'm saying and what I'm supporting is, yes, there might be a win-win situation, but this win-win situation will come when Turkey will realize that the other way is a lose situation for Turkey, which means that we need at the time both the sanctions on the table. And when I'm speaking about sanctions, I mean real sanctions, sanctions which will make Turkey face a new reality. And on this basis, we might have a new agreement with Turkey. We cannot wait, because if we wait, the deterioration of Turkey's democracy will be even bigger than what it is already today. The deterioration of the economic situation in Turkey will be bigger. A Turkey in a big economic and social problem is not an easy partner. It's even more dangerous in the future. So I would say that Europe has to realize that we cannot wait for any kind of America's intervention, as we are, unfortunately, my generation of politicians are still used to think, that we have to take our own fate in our hands. Last but not least, Europe has to understand that we are the north of the Mediterranean. The south is on the other side of the Mediterranean, but the Mediterranean is our sea. So we have to understand that if we want to have our part of the Mediterranean in a stable situation, it is extremely important that our presence in the south of the Mediterranean is strong and is reliable and is effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bakoyannis. You've given me something to ask Mr. Ali, because you said we must not wait for America's intervention anymore. Mr. Biden declared the day before yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, that America is back. What does that mean? What does that mean for NATO? What does that mean for the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean, that you pointed out before, that it has regained its centrality? Mr. Ali.
Well, first of all, I never said that we must wait that Erdogan is out of the game. We must act immediately, as Madam Bakoyannis was saying. I fully agree. I was just trying to give a broader view on what is happening. And regarding NATO, well, Madam Bakoyannis said NATO has an extremely difficult position. Yes, particularly difficult after 4 years of continuous delegitimation by President Trump. We must remember that if the main stakeholder of the alliance withdraws or every day says, no, NATO is obsolete and blah, 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 of course, the political power of NATO decreases. The military power is still there. But politically speaking, difficulties are more important. So it's not a point that we wait for the United States. But of course, NATO is strongly determined in its political action by the United States. So I hope Biden will revert to the trend with respect to President Trump. And I think this will be also useful in the discussions with Turkey, because Turkey had the chance to take advantage from the fact that the United States was saying, okay, NATO is not important for us, of course. Regarding the NATO and the European Union and the European defense, you know that the common defense of Europe was an idea of Alcide de Gasperi in the 50s. Then it has come back since 3-4 years. The first people speaking about that were Federica Mogherini and Jens Stoltenberg. I'm a good friend of Federica Mogherini, a very good friend of General Graziano, who is now the head of the military structure of the European Union. Well, they have put together 72 common projects which are going on. The transition to a European common defense is very long and it's very difficult because there is a problem of each individual army, each individual state, and so on. But we are going on. We must go on, but we cannot say as President Macron, well, now we need a common army. It takes time for that. But we are progressing. Last point, I fully agree about the cynical behavior of Putin in Nagorno-Karabakh. Putin has great interest with Baku, with Azerbaijan for the oil, and at the same time he sells weapons to Armenia. So I say that this has been one of Putin's conflicts, not only frozen conflict. It's one of the Putin's conflict, including Donbass, Crimea, including Transnistria, including Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and so on. I just wanted to say, I think, in 2016, when Putin announced the withdrawal of some troops from Syria, 3 days after that, the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh started again, and it was attacked from the Armenians to the Azeri. I don't believe in coincidence in politics. I never believe in coincidence. If you go back and see the dates, that's very clear. So this is the reason why I say that the Nagorno-Karabakh, yes, is an attempt of Putin of not having too many discussions with Turkey, but it's mainly his defeat in this specific conflict. Just a point regarding Moldova, which seems to be so far, but well, of course, I welcome the election of Madam Sandu as president of Moldovan Republic. I say we have to keep our eyes very open, because I can expect something in Transnistria. Remember, the Transnistria military occupied by the Russians. So I don't think that Putin will accept the decision of the Moldovan people to elect a pro-European leader. There are already problems in Transnistria. I hope it will not become a warm conflict.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. The last point was very, very interesting. It's something we should be following. The last question by you, Mr. Kasoulides, besides the first question, can actually Turkey jeopardize the unity of the European Union itself or NATO? You are a European with a lot of years in European institutions. So I would like to have your view on that.
Well, definitely it will not jeopardize the unity, is too far-fetched to say, but it's creating problems and a threat to the cohesion of the NATO alliance and of the European Union. And I don't see something everybody is saying quietly, but everybody accepts it loudly, that Turkey is not a European country in order to join the European Union. We shall have to be sincere with Turkey, and we should have to say to Turkey in so many words. And of course, Mr. Ali has mentioned about another treaty, something else, a special relationship, but definitely if Turkey joins the European Union, yes, the European Union will never be the same, and it will be to the detriment of the European Union. Now, let me return to the issue of defense and the role of the new incoming American administration. Definitely, Mr. Biden will return to more traditional foreign policy in favor of multilateralism, and NATO is a multilateral forum, is an alliance. He will treat his allies with much more respect instead of the rude way that Mr. Trump was treating them, who at the same time was expressing admiration to the autocrats and dictators in the world, the likes of Putin, of Xi Jinping, or Erdogan. This will definitely change. But the entrenchment policy of the United States, which quite correctly, Mr. Ali has mentioned it, the United States started this entrenchment with the pivot policy of Mr. Obama, and they will not return to the region the same we knew it before. Therefore, the region will have to depend on the stakeholders of the region and saves a number of their problems. Neither the calls from Washington, D.C. to the Europeans about the need to strengthen their defense spending will stop. And that is why I agree with President Macron, saying that if we are going to increase to that importance our defense spending, we might as well do it to an autonomous defense policy of the European Union. Not a divorce from NATO, certainly not, but this autonomy, I agree with Mr. Ali, will go by step until it comes to a position where it will be really called a common defense. Although I want to finish with the fact that the European Union has to show its strength, which is, I repeat, an economic leverage, to countries like Turkey, to countries like those that are threatening the cohesion and stability of the Union. Finally, the fact that the issue of the Nagorno-Karabakh, which has been mentioned, legally and according to international law, it was a Azerbaijan's territory, and therefore the principle of territorial integrity applied to Azerbaijan, certainly. Certainly, the issues of Sesendidis, Donbass, in Transnistria, in Abkhazia, and Northern Ossetia, etc., these are no longer frozen conflicts. They can become very hot and all of a sudden. But I haven't heard, I'm not saying that I'm jealous, but I haven't heard the same rhetoric to be used about the occupation of 4% of the Cyprus Republic and the fact that the issue of international law and the issue of territorial integrity should have been mentioned. It gets forgotten. Why I don't misunderstand Mr. Ali? Because it tends to be forgotten and it tends to be left to its fate. Thank you.
Mr. Kasoulides, that note, and allow me as a Cypriot politician to close this conversation on that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on time. And gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. I'm sure whoever our audience today is more wealthy in terms of geopolitics, geostrategy, and Europe and NATO that are going through turbulent times. And on the ideas you've put on the table on how to handle, especially Turkey in the area that is causing these problems nowadays, but the rest of the issues that are expected to arise in the following times. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye.